Today's book is Black Beauty, retold by Sharon Lerner and illustrated by Susan Jeffers. We're reading the picture book Black Beauty, but it's adapted from the novel by Anna Sewell. And Anna Sewell wrote Black Beauty to induce kindness, sympathy, and understanding of how to treat horses. It was the first book ever written from a horse's point of view, and it was an immediate success as soon as it was published. So let's hear from Black Beauty. I remember when I was just a colt. I lived in a beautiful meadow with my mother. Our master was a good and kind man, so we were very happy. But my mother said, there are many kinds of people in this world. Some are kind, some are cruel, and some are just careless. I hope you will always try to be gentle and do your best to please your master or your mistress. When I was 4 years old, my master taught me to wear a bridle and a saddle and to carry someone on my back. He also taught me to wear a harness and to pull a carriage. Soon after, I was sold to Squire Gordon and had to leave my mother and start my new life. When Squire Gordon showed me to his young wife, she said, "Oh, what a beautiful horse. We shall call him Black Beauty." And so, that became my name. I made a lot of friends in my new home. There was a fat gray pony named Mary Legs and a handsome chestnut mare named Ginger. When I first met Ginger, she seemed angry and bad-tempered. Squire Gordon's young daughters were afraid of her because sometimes she would bite and snap at them. After a while, Ginger and I became good friends. She told me that the reason she seemed bad-tempered was because her former owner had treated her cruelly. It was hard for me to understand because I had only known kindness. I was sorry for Ginger, but John Manley, our carriage man, and Joe Green, the new stable boy, were so gentle and patient with her that as weeks went by, Ginger seemed less frightened and angry. John said, "Kindness is all the medicine she needs." One night I was awakened by the ringing of the stable bell. "Wake up, Beauty," called John. "Our mistress is ill and we must fetch the doctor." John quickly threw on my saddle and away we raced, through the park and down to the village. "Mrs. Gordon is very ill," John told the doctor. "We must go to her at once." Dr. White's horse was lame, so even though I was hot and tired, I had to carry him back to the Gordon house as fast as I could. When we got to the house, the doctor ran inside and Joe, the stable boy, led me to the stable. I was so exhausted that I was trembling, and Joe, who didn't know any better, gave me cold water to drink. And by the time John got home, I was lying down in my stall and shivering with cold. John shook his head as he covered me with warm blankets. "Stupid boy," he said. "Joe, you might have killed Beauty, and he saved our mistress's life." I know it was just ignorance, but I think that's almost as bad as wickedness. When people say I didn't mean any harm, and they think that makes it all right. I recovered quickly, but poor Mrs. Gordon was still quite ill, so the family decided to move to a warmer climate for her health. Master Gordon sold Ginger and me to an old friend, and Mary Legs was given to the vicar. Our new master was nice enough, but his wife liked to drive the carriage with a very tight rein to keep our heads up. It was quite painful, and finally Ginger could stand it no longer and kicked out so wildly that she fell down. That was the last time Ginger pulled the carriage. One day, Mr. York, the coachman, was away, and a man named Reuben Smith was left in charge. He decided to ride me into town to the local tavern. I had a loose shoe, but Mr. Smith did not seem to notice. On the way home, he whipped me into a gallop, and my loose shoe came off on the rough cobblestones. Soon my poor hoof was broken and split. It was impossible to keep my footing on the sharp stones. I stumbled and fell to my knees. When we were finally found and brought home, the farrier examined my knees. He said I would recover, but my knees would always be scarred. my master decided to sell me to a livery stable. I was very sad to say goodbye to Ginger. "I'm losing the only friend I ever had," said Ginger sadly as they led me away. My new master kept many horses and carriages for hire, and because I was reliable, I was greatly sought after. Many of the people who hired me didn't even know how to drive, and some thought horses were just like steam engines and tried to go as fast as they could. But sometimes a kind person who had some driving experience hired me, and that was not so bad. One such man was Mr. Barry. He took a great liking to me and arranged to buy me as a riding horse. Unfortunately, Mr. Barry had never owned a horse before, and so he hired a stable and a groom to care for me. The groom he hired stole grain from my feed bin and was so lazy he never cleaned my stall. My feet grew sore from standing in the dirty straw. Mr. Barry was disgusted and decided to give up keeping a horse. I was sold again. This time, I was sent to a horse fair, and there I was bought by a man who drove a horse cab in the city of London. His name was Jeremiah Barker, but everyone called him Jerry. He brought me home to his merry family, and I thought I would be happy again. I soon learned that driving a cab through the bustling streets of the city was hard work, but Jerry gave me Sundays off to rest, so it was not so bad. One cold winter's evening, Jerry and I drove some gentlemen to a party, and we were told to wait. We stood in the freezing wind for more than 2 hours. Jerry had a bad cough and huddled against me for warmth. And when we finally got home, Jerry's cough was so bad, he could hardly speak. But he rubbed me down and he put a warm blanket on me before going to bed. The next morning, no one came for me. I saw the doctor go to the house, and when the children came to feed me, I realized that Jerry was very ill. The doctor said Jerry would recover, but must never drive a cab again. The family was going to live in the country where Jerry would become a coachman. And I was to be sold once more. My next master was a cab driver named Nicholas Skinner. He was a cruel man and very hard on his horses. At the end of one busy day, I was carrying a family with lots of luggage, and I was exhausted. And when we came to a big hill, I could go no further. Skinner used his whip on me, and when I tried to move, I slipped and fell. As I lay on the cold ground, I heard a man say, "He's dead. He'll never get up again." And then someone put a warm blanket on me and poured water into my mouth. I slowly staggered to my feet and was led back to Skinner's stable. After a few days of rest, I was brought to a sale for broken-down horses. Just as I was about to give up hope of ever being happy again, a young boy walked up to me and gently patted my neck. "I like this horse, Grandpapa. Can we buy him?" The boy's grandfather smiled as he pulled out his purse to pay for me. "You have a good eye, my boy. With some gentle care and the sweet grass in our meadows, we might begin to see the good breeding in this horse." Mr. Thorogood, my new master, was as good as his word. I was given free run of a beautiful meadow and plenty of food, and after several months, I began to feel young again. One day, when it was time for me to begin work, a young man came to get me ready. As he was cleaning my face, he said, "This is just like the star Black Beauty had. I wonder where he is now." He looked me over more carefully, and then he began to smile. He was sure he knew me. "Beauty, it's me, little Joe Green. When I was a young stable boy and didn't know any better, I was careless, and it almost killed you. But I promise I will make up for it now." Joe kept his promise. He was the gentlest and most caring of grooms. The young ladies of the house learned to drive me in a light cart and promised never to sell me. I was happy at last, and I was once again called by my old name, Black Beauty. Susan Jeffers does such a beautiful job illustrating this book. And in the original novel, when it was published in 1877, it had an immediate impact on how people treated their carriage horses and their working animals. So Anna Sewell really made an impact on this world. There's also a great film from 1994 called Black Beauty, and it's on Vudu, YouTube, Netflix, iTunes, Amazon Prime. You can watch it, but we're going to give you a link to a trailer to see what you think. I think you'll like it. They measure the height of horses by hands. Why? Because when the early settlers came and they were working with horses, they didn't want to carry around a stick with them to see what size the horse was. So an average horse is 14.5 hands high. How tall is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and a half. This is how tall an average horse is? Wow. Let's measure some more things with hands. Here's an easy way we can learn to measure by hands. First, you're going to need just some scrap paper, pen, and some tape. So, I am going to trace my hand at the top of the paper. Trace my hand. And then, beautiful. Then I'm going to trace my hand again. And I'm going to kind of guess how many hands I would trace for how tall I am. So I've made about 15 hands thinking that might be right. And now I'm going to tape them together. All 15 of them. So I've taped together 10. I think I might only be 10. So now I'm going to see how tall I am. How many hands am I? Looks like I'm just a little over 9 hands high. I wonder how tall you are, how many hands you are. And I wonder how many hands your parents are, or your brother, or your sister, or your bike. How many hands is your bike? I mean, that's like a horse. I wish it were a horse.